Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Frank Discourse. This is episode number 5. And I am here with the inimitable James Fay.
Hi, everyone. Hello, Frank.
Hello, James. I hope we can get through this after that huge meal that we just had and we don't fall asleep while doing this podcast.
Very lovely meal.
Yeah, it was. It was good eating. And boy, I am stuffed. Are you full enough? Did you eat enough?
I did.
You didn't get any of those chocolate chip cookies. We might have to pause this so you can eat some chocolate chip cookies, James.
Yeah.
Nancy got those just for you. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome again. Today, we're going to deviate from what we usually do. We're going to be much less political. It's still going to blend in and into the political in some ways, because in today's world, it's hard to bring up any subject without getting somewhat into political, or at least cultural, which a lot of people have conflated into political. But I want to talk today about human virtues, and more specifically, what is the most important human virtue there is. And I'm going to make an argument and a case for what I believe is the most important virtue. And unfortunately, it is the virtue throughout human history that's needed the most, yet has always throughout human history been in least supply. Some years ago, I was on Quora, and I saw a question posed on there of what was or what is the most important of all the human virtues. And a vast majority of them said love. And I think in second place was compassion, and a significant amount of people said truth. And I was waiting. I scrolled probably through at least 100, maybe 150 answers, trying to look for the one that I thought was the most important. And I never found it. I never saw it. So a little while ago, a few weeks ago, I revisited, in preparation for this podcast, I revisited that thread, and I had to scroll through a lot. Compassion was way up there, even more so than was a few years ago. And there were some others mentioned, but finally I came to one. And, well, James, now I know you know what we're going to talk about, but if 2 weeks ago I came to you with this question, say, James, what do you believe is the most important of all the human virtues? What would you say? Or what would have you said?
I probably would have said compassion. I think that would be my gut reaction. That kind of would sum up like the difference between humans and other animals that kind of separates us. That's what, that would be my first reaction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair. Well, you would have a lot of company.
Sure.
I scrolled down, like I said, a few weeks ago when I was looking at this thread again, and I finally found one, and somebody put a quote on by Maya Angelou. I had no idea that Maya Angelou said this. So I believe that the most important virtue is courage, and I want to break that apart during this podcast. And the quote by Maya Angelou is, quote, "Courage is the most important of all virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. You can practice any virtue erratically, but nothing consistently without courage," end quote. And I believe it's the most important. And to that point, to Maya Angelou's point, it's courage that gives value to every other virtue there is. Without courage, every single or almost every single other value has no gravitas, it has no teeth, it has no depth to it, especially in difficult times, hence her reference to practicing virtues consistently. So I think we need to define courage. One of my favorite, I would say my favorite definition of courage is the ability to act and do the right thing when you're most afraid. Because without fear, there can be no courage. I mean, nobody It doesn't take courage to brush your teeth because there's no fear involved in brushing your teeth. And if you fear brushing your teeth, well, you should maybe seek professional help. But for most of us, there is no fear washing your hands or brushing your teeth. So there's no courage involved there. Fear has to be present for there to be courage. I want to do a comparison on some of the other ones that were listed, and love and compassion were two of them that were listed that I want to talk about why courage is still, to me, the apex, the acme of all human virtues. I mean, love, and again, I'm not disparaging any other virtue. Of course, all these virtues are great. They're wonderful. They're very important to have instilled in you and have a sense and to practice these virtues. But I mean, love was probably the biggest on the list, the most numerously mentioned out of all, the most on the Quora question. And well, love is no good without courage, because if you don't have the courage to express that love, then what good is it? I mean, you could say that you love your spouse, but if you berate or belittle and that person, well, what good is your love if you don't even have the courage to tell them or express your love? What good is that love? If you don't have the courage to tell someone that you love them because it'll leave you vulnerable, it'll leave you open to hurt and pain and heartache. Well, again, what good is that love if you can't express it to another person? And maybe that courage is contagious. Maybe that person needs to see you make that leap of faith in order to say it for themselves and express it for themselves. So again, like another source of love, or I would say object of love, is family. Well, again, what good is love of your family if, say, your family or your children or your spouse, somebody threatens them physically or invades your home and you run away in fear? What good did your love do for them? How did you love? And I'm sure that anybody who was ever in that position, you would put them on a lie detector test. Do you love your family? And they would say yes, and they would pass that test. But again, what good was that love if there was nothing there, if there was no courage to back that love up? It doesn't do anybody good. It doesn't do yourself any good, and it doesn't give the objects of your love any good if there's no courage to back it up. So that's one example. Again, the second one, as what you mentioned, James, is compassion. And first of all, I think compassion is one of the most misused, overused, and misunderstood virtues there is today. And it's no wonder so many people believe that this is the highest of virtues. And I'm not saying it's not important. Of course, it's vitally important to have compassion. And like you said, to your point, James, it separates us from the animals.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, compassion is why, why wouldn't we just get rid of the homeless person on the street begging for change and begging for money?
Right.
Because they're obviously sapping from the efficiency of our system, of our society. So the most efficient thing and the most logical thing was to get rid of them. They're a sap on our system. But we have this thing called compassion, which is what we say we need to help this person and try to elevate that person, get them at least out of the most horrific of those situations, and at least get them to a somewhat stable existence. Mm-hmm. And that's...
Yeah, there's an anthropologist, Margaret Mead, I think it was, and someone asked her, this is in the 60s, I guess, 70s, and they asked her, how do you know when human civilization begins, throughout the timeline of Neanderthals and things like that. And they said when they found skeletons with broken bones that had healed. And they said that was when they knew that civilization had started, because an animal, if you broke your leg, they would just keep going. They wouldn't come back and that shows that the other people in the group had enough compassion to bring that person along with them, to set their leg, and to keep them going.
Oh, that's a good point. I've heard of Margaret Mead. Yeah, that's actually a really good point, and that would obviously indicate compassion. But I think if you went back even 30 years or longer, I don't think you'd get a fraction of the people listing compassion as the highest virtue.
Yeah, I think the definition now would be different.
Yes.
People define it differently now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, compassion does go under the rubric of love. And I mean, that is an expression. Compassion is an expression of love. It's love for the people around you. It's love for a stranger, even, and it shows. The second thing about compassion is that people. I think the reason why it's so popular now, and actually I think I saw compassion a few weeks ago on this Quora thread as listed even more than I saw love. So even within a few years, I think that changed. And I think the problem also with compassion is that people think compassion is this absolute, incontrovertible truth or incontrovertible good, and that there's no bad side about it. And they don't understand that there's a dark side of compassion, and there absolutely is a dark side of compassion. And compassion makes people rush in to help someone who's seemingly being disadvantaged without ever taking the time to see the entire picture, the whole story. An uncontrolled compassion will drive a child, and maybe even some adults nowadays, upon seeing a butterfly trying to break out of its cocoon, to see the struggle, see how long it's taking, see how much that butterfly is struggling to break out of its cocoon. And then they'll go over and break open the cocoon so the butterfly can get out. And they'll think they're being a compassionate, good person for doing that. But what they don't understand is that if they opened up the cocoon and helped the butterfly out, that butterfly is going to drop to the ground and die. Because it has to go through that struggle. It has to go through that adversity in order to gain the strength so it can fly away and become a full adult butterfly. And people, they don't think. It's first tier thinking is what Thomas Sowell used to call it. First tier thinking, never thinking, is this going to work? And who or what is this going to benefit? People look at compassion as, I'm a compassionate person, therefore I'm a good, decent human being, and that's as far as they think about it.
Right. It's like as long as they, in their own mind, are coming from a place of compassion, that there automatically makes their acts, good.
Yes.
In their own mind, and how could you tell them otherwise?
Yeah, and what that leads to is it's I call it cheap grace, and it's unearned moral virtue, because people will tell themselves, I'm a compassionate person because I believe this and I think we should do this, never thinking what the possible negative ramifications of that might be. So therefore I'm a wonderful human being. And again, it's unearned moral virtue. And people. But again, so that's the dark side of compassion, is not understanding that what your actions under the rubric of compassion, what the side effects of that are, what the negative outcome and negative result may be. And I think my favorite phrase of that, and I forget who said it, was that compassion, just remember, that compassion is what the mother bear feels towards her cub while she's tearing you apart and eating you. Oh. And
that's a graphic visualization, Frank.
Yeah, it is. But I think I laughed when I heard that because, but I thought it made a great point. It made a great point. So we have that, and just to go into that. And this is the kind of compassion, this dark side of compassion that we're seeing all over our society now. Compassion, quote unquote, is driving people and even doctors to do permanent damage with hormones and drugs, and sometimes mutilate our own children with surgery who say they're trans because they don't want the child to feel bad or isolated or left out or awkward. Compassion is giving our children trophies when they lose sports games so they don't feel so bad for losing. And compassion is telling obese, overweight people that they are wonderful and beautiful and that there's nothing wrong with them. That even to point out the health risks of being obese is hateful, and it's what, the famous phrase today, fat shaming. And never mind all the physical or psychological ramifications of being obese and the self-confidence issues that obesity presents. So these are all the dark side, and all the people who will call you, oh, you're fat shaming, and we should tell all these. Who's the really big fat singer?
Lizzo.
Lizzo, yeah. All the people who are surrounding Lizzo telling her, oh, there's nothing wrong, and she's wonderful, and she's fine, and she's beautiful just the way she is. You're not doing her and people like that any favors. You're actually, I think it's a form of cruelty. And again, you don't have to be mean. You don't have to be. You don't have to berate her. You don't have to call her names. Of course.
Yeah.
None of that should happen.
Right. But should be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Be honest. And the true side of compassion for people who are obese is to say, "Hey, look, you need some help here, and I'm concerned about your health, and maybe." Let's try to work a system out. Let's try to work a strategy out for you to get healthier and lose some weight. That's the true compassionate thing.
Sure.
I think it's the antithesis of compassion to just, oh, you're wonderful, you're beautiful just the way you are.
Right.
You're perfect. There's nothing wrong with you. I think that's a form of cruelty, and I say it even borders on evil. I truly do.
Right. I mean, that's to be honest with someone is to be, you have to have courage to do that, and not to fall in line with everybody else who's saying, oh no, it's fine, that they're overweight.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is why without courage,
right,
even compassion is toothless. Mm-hmm. It has no meaning behind it. Obviously, by encouraging somebody who's doing the wrong things for themselves and the self-destructive behavior, all that does, in telling them there's nothing wrong with how they are or what they're doing, you're just reinforcing. You're enforcing that self-destructive behavior. And the problem is in our society right now is that it has generated this quote-unquote compassion that we're talking about. It's created a few generations of entitled narcissists, spoiled brats we have now in this country. I mean, many whom are old enough now, they're entering the workforce, and they are in the workforce. Again, with compassion, if a mob is unjustly attacking someone, but they should be helped instead of being attacked, what good is that compassion if you don't have the courage to stand up against the mob to help that person? And that, what you mentioned, James, is the being honest, the being truth. And truth is also a very well, it was pretty well represented in what the most important. I think truth is vitally important. That's the entire point of this podcast, is to seek truth, to try to find out, try to work it out as best we can.
Sure. Yeah.
Being the mere meager mortals that we are and the flawed humans that we are, we still have to find the truth. But again, what good is truth is if you don't have the courage to speak it. If all around you everybody is spewing lies, even if many of them actually believe those lies, I mean, are you going to have the courage to speak the truth if it means you'll be talked or shouted down? If you lose your friends, estranged family members, you could lose your job now by talking the truth, by speaking the truth. You could be ostracized by a good portion of the society. So without courage, again, truth, compassion, love, they're useless. They're pretty much useless virtues. And that's why, and that's, again, that's why I believe that it's the most important one. And again, like I said before, it is unfortunately the least supply. It's most needed in almost every aspect of life, but it's in least supply. Now, courage comes in a lot of forms, and we all have our lacunas, personal. We all have our weaknesses, and just because you find someone who's courageous in one area of life doesn't mean they're going to be courageous in another area of life. You can have a soldier who will disregard his own life, his own health, in the middle of combat with bullets and artillery flying all over the place, and they will not even think twice about running out there in the middle to grab one of their fellow soldiers, their fellow comrades, and try to drag them to safety. And yet that same soldier who has that unbelievable courage to do something like that will stay in a toxic relationship because they don't have the courage to leave that relationship. And they may know it's damaging. They may know it's toxic. They may know it's not good for either one of them to be in and continue this relationship, but they're too afraid. They don't have the courage to leave it. So you'll have a mother who may attack a male aggressor towards her children, or another loved one may not have the courage to leave an abusive relationship, or speak up against her boss who is doing something immoral because she might lose her job. Someone might have the courage to stand up against any coworker doing harm, but doesn't have the courage to stand up against a family member doing something wrong. So there are many, many other virtues. And the only other one I think that I want to talk about is, and again, we'll bring it back to courage, is I think the second most important virtue, and that is wisdom. And you have other great virtues, honesty, of course, which is intertwined with truth, patience, kindness. But I do believe that wisdom comes in second. And there's an old Jewish parable told during Passover Seder about the 4 sons. The story is in the Haggadah, which is like the instruction book to how to
like follow the Jewish faith.
No, it's actually specifically the Haggadah, I believe, is specifically for the Passover. It's how to do the Passover Seder.
Do the Passover. Okay.
Yeah, it's like an instruction.
Do the Seder.
For the Seder. So the story, the parable, is about the 4 sons. And so you have the first son is the wise son. Then there's the evil or bad son. There's the simple son. And then the 4th one is the son who is afraid or doesn't know how to ask questions. And when I first heard this story and I started looking into this story, I noticed that, okay, well, they have a bad son or an evil son, but there isn't a quote-unquote good son. And I've always believed one of the greatest, another great virtue is up there with wisdom. It's probably third on the list is goodness, to be a good, decent person. I think goodness is also one of the greatest of all the virtues. Now, goodness or decency are much more important to instill in your children than getting good grades or having a prestigious and or high-paying job to get into a prestigious school. Every single time I see those bumper stickers, a proud parent of so-and-so high school honor roll student. And I've always thought it'd be a wonderful thing to see a bumper sticker that said proud parent of a good child.
Yeah.
That would be really nice. But people think grades are going to get you in a...
Let's start making them, Frank. We'll sell them.
Well,
yeah.
Maybe we could.
Yeah.
I mean, why not? Selling everything else.
Yeah.
But, well, given the fact that you and I are not parents, I think we might run into some trouble on how to raise a good kid. And, well, that's the parent's most important job, is to create a good, decent, moral adult. And I've always been impressed with someone who actually is good, is a decent person, than I have with how intelligent someone is, or definitely how much money someone makes. So why is there a bad or evil son, but there is no good son? And that was the question that I wrestled for quite a while, until I read a bunch of things, and I came to the realization that no, there is an opposite of the bad son, and that is the wise son. Because you cannot be a good, decent person without wisdom. It's impossible to be a good person. And that's going back to on the compassion. People think they're good, they're good, decent people because they're compassionate. And meanwhile, they're for policies that do the exact opposite of what they're intended to do. You know, you even look at something like the minimum wage.
Sure.
The minimum wage, I used to be for a higher minimum wage because I thought, oh, that's a really nice thing to do, until I realized that economically and read real economics and figures and numbers on what the minimum wage does. And what it does, it actually takes away the jobs from the very people it's supposed to help. And right now in California, you have all these fast food restaurants, and they've let go thousands and thousands of employees to put in these kiosks, these automatic kiosks. So all these people, thousands of people, are losing their jobs.
Yeah, because would they raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour? I think.
I thought it was 15, but you may be right. I
think
don't
it's
know.
20 for fast food. I think specifically.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh okay.
Yeah,
So
in
there's
California.
specific thing for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all these people there's thousands and thousands. It could be even tens of thousands of people have lost their jobs now in California because of the raising. And it was either Governor Newsom or the mayor of Los Angeles. I can't remember who said it, but they even said in an interview. I believe it was the L.A. Times that even printed this. And said, well, we know it's going to cause the loss of jobs, but we still have to do the right thing. I mean, you think about that phrase. Wait, you know it's going to lose jobs, but you still need to do the right thing? I thought the right thing was keeping people employed. And so they would have a job. But right there, that contradiction just absolutely blew me away. And no, well, you're not doing the right thing. If you're losing jobs and you're causing people to lose their jobs,
Right.
you have obviously done the wrong thing.
Yeah, and these are the most vulnerable people, economically in society. These are the ones that are looking for minimum wage jobs at fast food places. I
Yes.
mean, they're low skill labor jobs.
Yep.
And essentially by raising the minimum wage, you're either eliminating their job, or as an employer, you're going to say, well, I'm not going to hire some 16-year-old kid to do this when a 25-year-old who has work experience wants the job. So now these young workers are missing out on jobs. I mean, why, if you're an employer, you're not going to hire at a $20 an hour rate some kid has never had a job before.
Yeah, and then that young person doesn't even have the ability, and they lose the ability to get the work experience.
Right.
What it takes. And yeah, exactly to your point. They're not going to, oh, wait, you have a college degree? Okay, I'll hire you instead.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, that kid in high school.
Right. They never get the building blocks of employment.
Yes.
They don't get those skills.
Yep. Yep, and yeah, so it's bad for everybody. It's bad for society. It's bad, obviously, for the worker. It's bad for the employer, because so many of these, like these fast food restaurants, they can't afford to pay somebody $20 an hour. The market doesn't even allow for that to be paid $20 an hour.
Yeah, sure.
So they make these kiosks. They make these machines.
Yeah,
that do the work.
They don't take sick days.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They break down every now and then, but it's still a lot less than how many people call out.
Yeah, sure.
So it's not really good for anybody. So again, but that's compassion. People think they're compassionate because, oh yeah, I'm for, and I helped fight for the rising of the minimum wage, to give people. This is the other term, to give these people a living wage. Well, a lot of people in entry-level jobs, they don't need a living wage because many of them, like you said, James, they're young. They're still living at home. Maybe this is a part-time job. It's to subsidize. Every job doesn't have to pay a living wage.
Sure.
And many of these jobs, these entry-level jobs, aren't structured for you. They are, like you said, building blocks. They're stepping blocks to get experience under your belt, and
Right,
you
right.
can advance.
Yeah, I mean, if people are making a comfortable wage, at these low skill jobs, there's no incentive for them to, move on and gain skills to have better jobs. So
Yeah.
it's hurting society as a whole. I mean, you shouldn't be, 40, 50 years old, competing for these jobs,
Yeah.
and saying, well, I have a family to feed. It's like, well, you should, what have you been doing for 30 years?
Yeah.
You should be, have other skills that can make you more employable.
Yeah, and there's another tier to this. There's another step in this whole process that people don't think about, and that is, okay, so this person was making $15 an hour, and now they're making $20 an hour. They're making what the person who is already there 4 or 5 years and maybe has advanced in the company a little bit more. They have more responsibility. That's why they're getting paid $20, and now they're going to the employer like, wait a second. This guy has been here for 3 months. I've been here for 5 years. Now he's making what I'm making, and he doesn't have half the responsibility that I do.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
I need a raise.
Yeah, I know
So-
that. I know that firsthand. I mean, I worked at a job, and you're there for 10 years, and then they raise minimum wage, and these new kids that they're hiring made just as much as we did. And we're like, well, why are we even trying then?
Yeah.
It's like, well, if I'm going home with the same paycheck as this kid who's just started, what's the point? You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
Yeah.
And again, it's a domino effect, and again, this goes back to the effect of first tier thinking. Nobody ever asks the question,
Right.
will this do good?
Right. They don't follow up on the consequences of their actions.
No, there's no thought process to that. The only question they ask is, does this make me feel good? And if the answer is yes, they couldn't care less whether it does any good or not. And yet those same people will say, "Oh, I'm a wonderful human being because I'm compassionate." No, you're really actually not compassionate. You're a very damaging person, and the policies that you vote for, the policies that you push for, and the policies that you advocate actually do a lot more harm than any good. So no, you're really not compassionate. In fact, you're kind of cruel, and these people have no idea how cruel they are. I mean, It goes to something I've always said. If only evil and bad people did all the evil and the bad in the world, we'd be living in a virtual paradise on this planet. But throughout history, the vast majority of damage and evil has been done by well-intentioned people.
Oh, sure.
And people just don't think about that. And my God, what a wonderful, because there really aren't that many bad, awful people out there. There's some people who, they may slide and do some nefarious things now and then, but there's not really truly. I mean, listen, even look at the evil people. I don't think at one point in any of their lives that Mao Zedong, the greatest murderer of human history, Joseph Stalin, the second greatest murderer of human history, and Adolf Hitler, third biggest murderer of human history. None of these men, at any point in their life, did they look in the mirror or as they're pulling the covers up to their chins as they went to bed, said, "Wow, I am one evil son of a bitch. I am a mean, nasty, evil scumbag." There's not one of them who thought that about themselves.
Right.
So, everybody thinks that they're doing good. Everybody thinks that they're wonderful. And again, this so-called compassion is this unbridled, believing this unbridled passion without thinking about any consequences. That's the road to some really horrible things that have happened. So, and I think now all my life going back to the wisdom thing, I've sought wisdom in those who have it. I have collected quotes since I was a teenager, and I've learned a lot of wisdom throughout the years. And the toughest challenge for me personally has always been my own personal application of that wisdom. I mean, I could give great advice on a number of things. I just can't always follow through with it. I can give great financial advice to people. I know how to live a very frugal life. I've just never been able to do it myself. I know I could put somebody on a workout regimen and get them in shape and tell them about health and diet and all the things to eat and what not to eat. But, I could definitely lose some pounds. There's no doubt about it. And I'm not in the greatest shape either. So following my own personal wisdom and the wisdom that I have, well, that's a totally different subject, and that's a challenge in and of itself. But I have always sought wisdom, and once again, it's the wisdom, and maybe it's fear. Everybody says that you don't follow your goals, and you don't see your goals through because of fear.
Oh, sure.
And in some manifestation. So obviously, for me, haven't had the courage to follow the wisdom that I have gained throughout the years on a myriad of aspects of my life.
Right.
So, again, none of this comes from, I am a master at all these things and these ideas. Far from it. I'm further from reaching those ideals than a lot of people out there. So, I think right now what we have is so many problems we have now are born and continue from people who don't have the courage to stand up to these lies.
Sure.
And they're too afraid to lose friends, to lose family members, lose their jobs, become pariahs, outcasts in their entire communities, in their own communities. And to go through some examples of that is there are so many doctors and nurses, epidemiologists, medical researchers, and other medical experts who didn't agree on many of the false and mendacious COVID-19 narratives, and especially with the vaccine, and particularly for young and healthy people, and they still don't. But fear and a lack of courage prevented them from standing up to the lies because they knew it would mean their jobs. Their reputation would be ruined. It would be difficult for them to be hired elsewhere. So cowardice, lack of courage, they kept their mouths shut. And a few in the beginning who did speak out, look what happened to them. The powers that be made them examples for the rest of us. Look what happens when they went against us, and this is going to happen to you. So, they want you to be a good little sheep and mind your mouth. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is a prime example of this. Jay Bhattacharya, have you heard of him, James?
I don't think so.
He's one of the doctors who came out, one of the earliest doctors who came out and went against the entire COVID-19 narrative about lockdowns and whatnot, and it cost him dearly. On an interview, the mental anguish, the loss of sleep, the health thing. He lost 40 pounds.
Wow.
Out of pure stress. He lost his job. He was made a pariah. And this is what was one of the most celebrated, most brilliant doctors in this country for decades. You used to say Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, pre-COVID, pre-2000, earlier than 2020. And people would they'd bow, they'd genuflect on that name because he was so highly regarded in the medical industry. Dr. Robert Malone, there's Dr. Atlas. There's many of these doctors who went against the narrative, and the entire medical establishment and mainstream narrative, these people, they try to destroy these people, and they did everything in their power. And those people I have such a respect for because they had the courage to stand up and speak while everybody else was lying. And so you have much of... Another example is in companies, much of top management, middle management, and certainly many, if not most of the workers in corporate America don't believe in DEI and these quote-unquote anti-racist and woke, which is just another euphemism for leftism, policies and mandatory training, I love this mandatory training they use. It's basically another term for re-education, but they can't say re-education because that's associated with Mao's Cultural Revolution,
Sure.
What they did in Vietnam once the Viet Cong and communists took over after we left. So all these companies, they do these mandatory training courses and seminars they push. There's so many people in these companies that are against this. So Why do they push it? Well, simple. Fear of being called a racist. So once again, cowardice and lack of courage keeps their mouth shut. The same companies have adopted a lot of this transgender movement mandates when it comes to pronouns, gendered language, and policies. Why? Because of the fear of being called transphobic. So cowardice, lack of courage keeps their mouth shut. Many professors, teachers, and students disagree with a lot of these far left agendas in colleges, like CRT, and which is critical race theory, and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. All these policies are pushed in our public schools, our private schools, colleges, universities, but the professors and the teachers may lose their jobs. And many, as I mentioned in episode 1, the students lose their friends, their associations, chance for job placement after graduation for countering so many of these lies that undergird these movements. And why don't they do that? Why don't they speak up? Well, because cowardice and lack of courage keeps their mouths shut. All these are problems that we're going, and everybody knows about it, but nobody speaks about what the causes and why no one is standing up to all this insanity that we see all around us, and that everybody on both sides of the political fence, except for the far left people who are pushing all these policies, everybody knows about it, but everybody lacks the courage. Again, the most necessary virtue is in the least supply. And that's why these people pushing this insanity, that's why they're winning. It's as simple as that. I mean, the females in sports, athletics, in public and private schools, colleges, universities, they keep their mouths shut when biological males compete in their events. Where Leah Thompson was in University of Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania threatened the women on the swim team, and many of the colleges that they competed against, their schools threatened those girls if they dared protest. They threatened job replacement after graduation. They threatened their grades, their reputations if they dared speak out. And
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. University of Penn absolutely had a affirmative action plan to intimidate and basically bully the girls and not saying a word.
Wow.
Who's the other woman? She was a swimmer. She actually did come out. She's huge right now, and she talks about you know who I'm talking about?
The one in Florida? I don't know.
I forget her name off the top of my head. I wish I knew. I can't think of her name offhand. She's big. She's huge, and she's probably the most vocal critic and vocal protester of these biological males, these trans women athletes being competing against women in sports. And so again, she has courage, and it's so few of these people who have the courage, and that's why I have such respect for them. And I mean, there are reporters in mainstream news organizations who are against a lot of this leftist activism that have taken over the narratives of the news, and again, they keep their mouths shut. So all these people, and I am guilty of this. I remember in high school seeing a kid slandered, picked on, made fun of, all because of a false rumor that started about him. And I, as well as many other kids, we knew it wasn't true, but none of us had the courage to stand up for him and go against the accepted narrative about him. And once again, cowardice ruled the day. So, and this is where I'm torn on this subject a lot. Because on one hand, in many ways, I can't blame a lot of these professionals and students for keeping their mouths shut. Many of these professionals have families to provide for, houses and mortgages to pay. They have food to put on their table, families to provide for, clothes, backs to clothe. And students have been told that their futures rely on getting recommendations from the college advisors, professors, counselors, etc., and the connections to get a good job after graduation. And in graduate school, the stakes are even higher. So on one hand, I can understand the threat when you have all that to lose.
Sure.
You've got a family, you've got a mortgage, you have a house. But on the other hand, to not have the courage to stand up to these lies, these wrongs, these injustices, these falsehoods, the tyrants and totalitarians, they gain more and more control. And they use intimidation to keep their own narratives going and to increase their own power by browbeating the opposition. And, being a student of history, studying the tyrannical and totalitarian regimes for decades, understanding how these regimes gain their strength, gain momentum, and eventually total power of their country, and then how they maintain their power. I understand that what we see are going on in this society are the exact same tactics that the left and these totalitarian regimes have used in the past. And once enough people accept a little lie, then the next lie, is a little bigger and it's a little easier to swallow. And once that is accepted, each preceding lie gets bigger and bigger, a little more dangerous. And it continues until you have an entire edifice, foundation of an idea or ideas, movements, structures, and institutions and narratives that drive an entire culture and society built on these lies. And you mentioned the book. What was that?
They Thought They Were Free
Yeah.
by Milton Mayer, I think his name is.
Okay. I'm looking that up right now. Yeah. And I'd like to... there was this... Yes, Milton Sanford Mayer. They Thought They Were Free. And what was this... give an outline of this book.
The book is... it was a journalist, I think it was a journalist in the 50s who went back. I think he was American, and he went to Germany, and he interviewed average people who lived through Nazi Germany, whether they're teachers or even a baker, just average people, and a priest, and asked them what it was like daily life. Like, we were looking at it from an outsider's point of view. Like, obviously this is an evil regime. Mm-hmm. How did you guys not realize that? And there's a lot of good quotes in there from the people, just saying how daily life had changed so much that it was imperceivable to them.
Yeah. Well, you gave me this one quote, and I want to read it from this book, from They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer. And so I want to do this quote, and here's the passage from this book. It's absolutely fantastic. But your friends are fewer now. Some have drifted off somewhere or submerged themselves in their work. You no longer see as many as you did at meetings or gatherings. Informal groups become smaller. Attendance drops off in little organizations, and the organizations themselves wither. Now, in small gatherings of your oldest friends, you feel that you're talking to yourselves, that you are isolated from the reality of things. This weakens your confidence still further and serves as a further deterrent to what? It is clear all the time that if you are going to do anything, you must make an occasion to do it, and then you are obviously a troublemaker. So you wait and you wait. But one great shocking occasion when tens or hundreds or thousands will join you never comes. That's the difficulty. If the last and worst act of the whole regime had come immediately after the first and smallest thousands, yes, millions would have been sufficiently shocked. If, let us say, the gassing of the Jews in 1943 had come immediately after the German firm stickers on the windows of non-Jewish shops in 1933. But of course, this isn't the way it happens. In between all the hundreds of little steps, some of them imperceptible, each of them preparing you not to be shocked by the next step. Step C is not so much worse than step B. And if you did not make a stand at step B, well, why should you at step C? And so on to step D. And one day, too late, your principles, if you were ever sensible of them at all, rush in upon you. The burden of self-deception has grown too heavy. In some minor incident, in my case, my little boy, hardly more than a baby, saying, "Jew swine," collapses it all, and at once you see that everything has changed, and changed completely under your nose. The world you live in, your nation, your people, is not the world you were born in at all. The forms are all there, all untouched, all reassuring: the houses, the shops, the jobs, the meal times, the visits, the concerts, the cinema, the holidays. But the spirit, which you never noticed because you made the lifelong mistake of identifying it with the form, is changed. Now you live in a world of hate and fear, and the people who hate and fear don't even know it themselves. When everyone is transformed, no one is transformed. Now you live in a system which rules without responsibility even to God. The system itself could not have attended this in the beginning, but in order to sustain itself, it was compelled to go all the way. That is a absolutely fantastic passage. And yeah, I love that. It goes to what I was saying before. Once you start with the little lie, well, then the next lie. I mean, I remember this in college. I saw it start when I was in college. And the first time I heard this, I was in college. I think, my sophomore year. And I heard this statement: black people can't be racist. And immediately, I thought to myself, that might be one of the dumbest, most idiotic things I've ever heard in my entire life. Black people can't be racist.
You actually heard some, I mean, I hear people saying that.
Oh, well,
but I never
now
actually
it's
heard. Yeah.
Now it's boilerplate college
I
humanities.
guess. I know, but I mean, I would hear that kind of stuff, but I never actually heard someone say it in real life.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
like,
This is
me,
back
you know.
in like 1990.
Right,
I heard this.
right.
And I remember thinking, and then finally I heard this, after about this second or third or fourth time I heard this, I actually confronted somebody. I said, wait, what do you mean black people can't be?
Right.
I was like, wait a second. Racism is a human construct.
Yeah.
And it's based in hatred, or at least a great severe dislike.
Yeah.
I said, so what you're telling me is if black people can't be racist, that means they aren't human, since it's a human construct. They're either
exactly.
superhuman or they're subhuman. Which one is it? And then people, no, you don't understand. Blacks can't be racist because they have no concentration of power in our society and in our culture. So it's only those who are in power and represent the power structure of the society, they're the ones who are racist. And I said, oh, so because they don't have any power, they can't be racist? They said, yes. I said, and I'll never forget having this conversation.
Yeah.
I looked at this person. I said, so what you're telling me is, okay, let's see the Grand Dragon or Grand Wizard, I don't know, whatever these assholes in the KKK call themselves. The head guy of the KKK, whatever it is, Grand Wizard, Master Dragon, something like that. I said, so if all of a sudden he found himself in, say, Nigeria,
Right.
he'd be like one of the only white people in that country. Therefore, he would cease to be racist.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, after all, in Nigeria, everybody is black. They're all Africans. The entire government is black. All their local municipalities are black. Everybody is black. So he has zero power. So therefore, this guy who heads the KKK could no longer be racist if he moved to Nigeria.
That's a good rebuttal.
And the person just looked at me like, yeah, this is how dumb that idea is, that black people or anybody can't, or any group of people can't be racist.
Yeah.
But again, now this is boilerplate college university teachings. And we have now generations of people who actually believe that lie. And so, well, when you accept that lie and it keeps on going and of another lie, well, then you have CRT, critical race theory. Every white person is racist. The only difference is those who know it and those who don't. So you have that. When you have, so this is the progress, and this is exactly what that quote from "They Thought They Were Free" alludes to. That, the step B, you didn't protest step B, and now comes step C, and then you have step D, and so on and so on. So again, going back to the original subject of courage, this can all be stopped with courage. And I can't understand why none of these CEOs of corporate America are putting up with this. All these people and graduates, they've come and taken over the human resources departments of these corporations. And again, these CEOs are scared to death. And again, it's all fear. no courage of being called racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, Islamophobic, you name it. Six Herb is what we talked about before.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So, look, I think right now we're on the precipice in our culture and society of having everything based on systemic falsehoods. I mean, so many of our institutions have already been captured by this new infrastructure of lies. And the biggest mistake I think that any American can make, and I have personal friends, I have family members who they don't grasp this concept. And this is the biggest mistake so many Americans are making right now. And that is to think that our freedoms, based in strength of our democracy and the ethical and competent basis of our institutions, can't crumble in their lifetime. That is one of the greatest mistakes we could ever make as a people, as a culture, as a nation. And that it can't crumble within a few years from now. I have very dear close friends who don't understand. They just think that their standard of living, this wonderful standard of living that we live in,
Sure.
that anybody from even lower middle class on up in this country lives, they think this is just going to last forever. It's fairy dust. Ronald Reagan, he famously said, and I love this quote, it's one of my favorite quotes from Ronald Reagan, and he said, quote, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on them for them to do the same, or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States where men were free," unquote. The only thing that could save us is if each individual has the courage to stand up and call out these lies that they're surrounded by. But that's what it takes. Again, the most important, most needed, yet least in supply virtue, and that's courage. And a few of my favorite quotes about courage, I'll read, and I'll end with this. Quote, "The secret of happiness is freedom. The secret of freedom is courage," unquote. And that was said by Thucydides.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I saw that quote, and it was attributed to some author, Carrie Jones. And it's not Carrie Jones. I think Carrie Jones, I think she's still alive. And how long ago did Thucydides live?
2,500 years ago?
Yeah, about that, yeah. So, a little older than Carrie Jones. But this is what happens when people aren't educated in history and the classics. They attribute things to someone today who actually said it yesterday. Then it devolves into someone taking credit for something that someone else once said. And similar to Maya Angelou's quote is one from C.S. Lewis that I love. And it goes to what I say. Quote, "Courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point," unquote. And C.S. Lewis was a very, very wise man. Unfortunately, but see, that's a whole nother subject. C.S. Lewis is what is most known for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Narnia.
Yeah, Narnia.
Yeah, Narnia. And yet, have you ever read anything like the Screwtape Letters or?
No.
I read. I still have yet to read the Screwtape Letters. I want to read that. I heard it's a phenomenal book.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, and but I read a whole collection of his essays, and it's a big book of his essays. And I mean, what a fantastic deep thinker C.S. Lewis was.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, he was a Christian apologist, and the arguments he makes for faith and a religious foundation are quite compelling. And, I don't subscribe to any religion. I'm an ethical monotheist. So would you consider yourself religious, James?
Not in any structured sense, I guess.
Were you raised in any?
I went to church every Sunday. Yeah.
What was it? Was it Catholic or
when
Protestant?
I was a kid, it was Catholic. Then we went to Protestant churches and different things, and Episcopalian.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a good wide variety of different denominations.
So did you ever have like a first communion or confirmation?
Yeah, I had first communion was Catholic, and confirmation was Episcopalian.
Yeah, well, Episcopalian is Catholicism light.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So, a lot of rules. So, a lot of people were asking me, hey, Frank, are you going to do any commentary on the debate? And I'm not going to do that because it's already been too long, and it's
Sure.
already been analyzed to death,
Right.
up and down, left and right. And plus, I wanted to make this episode mostly non-political.
Yeah.
And we had to, delve into some politics because it overlaps with our culture and cultural implications of what we talked about. But no, I'm not going to do that. And maybe if I had this episode out earlier, I would have. But it's not worth it now. So I want to thank everybody for listening. Hit like, subscribe, send it to everybody you know, and we will see you next episode. And remember, everybody, question everything. Take care.